feature presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled TIFF review. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rorabeck. Alongside, he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Marchen.
Hey, Matt. Day one, we just finished recording our review for Dear Evan Hansen, and what better way to follow that up with a review of Asghar Farhadi's A Hero, a film that
Do you think Asghar Farhadi would watch Dear Evan Hansen, or will he?
Well, I did make a comparison in the review of Dear Evan Hansen to this, where you have protagonists that, either tell a lie or embellish on the truth in order to sort of, help themselves in one way or another, and things kind of slowly but surely escalating to the point where, it goes completely out of control for the character. And the main difference here is one's a better movie, but two,
Sure.
One character is more sympathetic than the other and doesn't look, or isn't pretending to be a teenager who's actually, a 40-year-old man. But yes, we are talking about Asghar Farhadi's A Hero. The Iranian director returns to his homeland after having directed the Parisian film The Past and the Spanish movie Everybody Knows. It's a movie that, when it premiered at Cannes this year, was compared to Uncut Gems, which I have to take some sort of, I have to take a stance on this one, Matt, because I do feel that there is some escalation with, like frustration and sort of, day-to-day life, but it's not...
And things escalating, like you've already mentioned, and kind of no matter what you do, things get kind of worse and worse.
Yeah, but it's not as obnoxious or kinetic compared to
not at all.
the Safdie brothers film, where Farhadi is a guy that, for better or worse, pacing wise, likes to slowly build the set the stage for a character or characters living in kind of, whether it be tumultuous relationships or trying to get out of a bad situation. Here you have a character, Rahim, who is a prisoner, a convict who is on a 2-day leave, and when
Didn't know that was a thing, but cool.
No, it is.
I didn't know that.
So
is that a thing in like just not in our cultures or what?
No. So the movie, the movie Lockup with Sylvester Stallone, the opening scene of that film. Well, no, he's sent to like a maximum security prison where Donald Sutherland's warden tortures him because he wants revenge. But the beginning of the movie, he's on like a 2 or 3 day leave for good behavior because he'll.
Do you think we're the only A Hero review that will reference Escape Plan?
No, I said Lockup.
Oh, Lockout. Sorry,
Lockup.
I didn't see Lockout. I thought you were talking about Escape Plan.
Yeah, no.
Well,
Lockup.
now we mentioned both. So
but A Prophet is another movie that does that as well, where you see the Tahar Rahim character and A Prophet leave his prison for a few days because he's
fair
behaved and things like that.
I did not know.
But it is a weird thing to see, especially when you think of the prison system. A convict being completely and utterly isolated or in prison for the remainder of their sentence.
And they get a vacation.
Yeah, so he gets a 2-day leave, and he basically, reunites with his son who has a speech impediment, his girlfriend who he's kind of keeping a low profile with, because in Iranian culture, relationships in terms of how the courting system works is a little bit different to North Americans, and you don't want to necessarily advertise that you're in a non-wedded relationship.
And he was already married once too, right?
Yes, and that relationship did not go very well, as we learn. But sort of the idea of the story, or where it goes, is that this character, quote unquote, finds a bag of gold coins that initially he wants to pawn, because the reason why he's in prison, and this also goes into the complications and sort of fascination with a different culture. In Iranian culture, as we learn, if somebody owes someone else a debt and they don't pay it back, that person that is owed can basically put them on notice and that person that owes the debt will be arrested and
Yeah,
sentenced to
it's like a
prison time.
criminal charge, and it's not just, in what's the court that I'm talking about where you sue someone. I'm a moron,
Small
sorry.
claims
It's
court
yeah, or
or
just like
like
there's a different term for it. There's a criminal justice, and you can sue anyone kind of thing. But if I don't pay you your money, I'm not necessarily going to go to jail for it here. But in
yeah.
this culture, you can go to jail if you don't pay back a debt to someone.
So he initially thinks like, okay, well, I can use this bag of coins to, pay back at least part of that debt that I owe. And then he, decides not to, and does the right thing ultimately by, putting up flyers and trying to find the person who this bag of money or bag of coins belongs to. There's some money in there as well and other belongings. And then that's where I think the story gets really interesting, after somebody claims this bag, and how, this good deed, from the point of view of the prison, it makes the warden and just the system look better, that they have this exemplary convict who's being reformed. You have this charity that wants to help sort of pay back the debt, and how sort of this character is pulled back and forth between the two, and then slowly but surely things get more complicated when the woman that claimed the money, or the coins, disappears, and he needs to prove that, she exists, and that it's not a con on his behalf to get out of prison. His debt collector, who looks like Mandy Patinkin, I think
God,
is
that's
amazing
all
in some
all I could
scenes.
think of watching it though.
There are moments where, like, everybody else is totally enamored by the protagonist, and this debt collector is just like, are you serious? Like, this guy, ripped me off and brought shame to my family, and you're treating him like, a saint now. And I just kind of like the frustrations of those kind of moments that
Mhm.
do have
Where you
some
think,
humor.
am I going crazy? I'm the only person who
Yeah,
thinks this.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And somebody online actually, and I can't remember who it was, but they kind of posted that it's almost like an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Oh, it
And
was Jason, wasn't it?
yeah, and
Jason.
I kind of feel like
Yeah.
that, like, especially even the way this lead character kind of smiles with, a politeness, but at the same time you can see behind the facade of a guy slowly breaking.
Yeah, I think it's funny you brought up Dear Evan Hansen, because like even when I was watching the movie, I was like, wow, these movies are more not similar, but I understand what you were saying of like, someone who gets over their head in a lie, caught in a lie almost. And like one is, way better intentions than the other. Um but yeah, I'm a little mixed on the movie. I totally understand what you're saying. For me, the snail's pace, which you brought up, of like, likes to take it slow and kind of, just didn't really work for me. And like, I think maybe being the first movie of TIFF, and like, I don't know what I had no expectations going in, obviously. Didn't know really much about the movie at all. But I felt like I really liked the lead performance, which is something I tweeted too, by Amir Jadidi.
Jadidi, yeah.
Yeah, I
He's
really
amazing,
love
I think,
he.
in
I thought
the
he was
film.
great, and I really do genuinely, like, to start off with some positives. Like, really do genuinely think he is great in the movie. I loved his facial expressions throughout the movie and how he could emote with his face, and it was subtle in the way that like he would have this perma smile at moments where he would deliver dialogue, and he just have this kind of smirk on his face, which I thought was really lovely, and just made like, again, adds to that thing that you were talking about where everyone was kind of on his side or wanted to buy his story or wanted to like be like, let's get him out of jail, he did this amazing good deed. And like he had this charm to him, and he delivered all these lines with this kind of smirk, or how he would look at his son or other people. And I really liked that. And even as the movie goes on and he becomes more and more frustrated, like I just love the performance in his face, and his vocal, his dialogue performance, all that stuff too is fantastic. But then I just felt kind of removed from, the overall kind of plot of the movie, and kind of, I think, mostly in its length. Like it's 2 hours and 7 minutes. I felt like I just kind of got it pretty quickly, and like, and I never felt like it went much further than the initial kind of thing it was presenting to me right away. So I just felt like it ran really really long. And like you mentioned Curb Your Enthusiasm, and it was and Jason mentioned it on Twitter, which I think is an apt comparison, and I didn't think of that
Well,
until
even
he
the way
tweeted
that
it.
he smiles
And
sometimes when like Larry David smiles, like when he has those awkward moments of like, oh man, like I'm in over my head, or I was the reason why I got in this situation in the first place.
yeah, but then in an episode of Curb that usually goes on for 30 minutes or something, right? And I can kind of buy into that one situational kind of topic or thing that it's kind of poking fun at, or thing that escalates, or awkwardness of it all, that when it spread out over 2+ hours, I just started to lose interest. And even though I liked the lead performance, I liked the guy who looked like Mandy Patinkin, like there is some stuff to like in there. I just ultimately like started to kind of tune it out after a while, and I thought it started strong and then just kind of pittered out to the point where I'm just like, I'm just really bored. And I know that's really lazy criticism, but like, I'm sorry.
See, no,
That's kind of
I
how I
get what
felt.
you're saying, where I had the opposite reaction, where I felt like the setup was a little bit slow, and he
Yeah,
is a filmmaker that does take his time in order to introduce characters,
nothing wrong with that.
introduce
It just didn't work for me.
the culture itself. And I would really, I think, as much as we appreciate anybody listening to us, I would probably prefer you go listen to an Iranian film critic and sort of get
Absolutely,
their
yeah.
opinion on this, because I think part of my fascination with this as well is just learning about
The
the
culture and
politics
like,
and the
yeah,
culture
yeah, I
and
totally agree with
and
that. And
society in general there, because it's very different from our way of life. And just thinking about, like, one of the things that this character is most concerned about is people seeing him and showing him respect, and sort of not being disgraced as he's been, and,
yeah,
and
it
not
brought a
wanting.
lot of shame to him that he had to go to jail for this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he doesn't want to go back to jail, and you can see that desperation. The more the film goes on, where like he has dug this hole for himself deeper and deeper, and he's had the best intentions, and he wanted to course correct this whole thing sooner rather than later, but the further he goes along, it just gets worse, to the point where at times there's he can be physically and argumentatively clashing with people. And it's just like you think in those moments, it's like, man, don't do this, like you're so close, like don't, you're on the, like you're almost out. And
He wants it so bad, he actually
yeah.
digs his grave deeper because he wants it so bad, right? And that is the stuff that there is, that I liked about the movie. I just felt like, by the time we got to that point, which you're saying, that last act kind of, because I don't disagree with you that it kind of gets better as it goes along. I just think by the time it got to that point, I was already so far removed that I just couldn't get invested, even though I liked him. Like I liked him, but
Yeah, he's
yeah.
he's also, I mean, again, mentioning the Uncut Gems thing, as much as I think Adam Sandler's performance in Uncut Gems is great, Howard Ratner is not a likable character,
No.
where I find that this guy is way
No,
more
you're cheering
likable.
for him or you're
Yeah.
not cheering for Howard. Like, yeah, I don't necessarily get the uncut gems kind of comparison, but um anyways, keep going.
Yeah, I just think it's an interesting sort of lived in sort of film, where again, like you can I
Lived
mean
in's a
we
good term because I was gonna use that. I like the stuff that takes place like in the city, in the marketplaces, and him going around trying to find more information about this woman and stuff
yeah, it
like that.
becomes
Like,
kind of a detective procedural kind of story halfway through. But I even like the stuff with his own family, and just
yeah,
looking at that family dynamic. And that's something that Ashghar Farhadi does so well. I mean, his best film is still A Separation, and I think that that is almost going to be impossible to top. But in terms of everything else that he's done since then, I would say that this is easily his best movie. And again, part of it is the lead. I think part of it is some of that intrigue and sort of doing the investigation and trying to find this woman who just mysteriously vanishes halfway through without a trace. And then I think also part of it is just kind of looking at this character when we're first introduced to him. He's already spent 3 years in jail.
mhm.
And you see from the point of view of this collector who doesn't trust a word that he says, and doesn't want to give him a second chance, and doesn't want to lift, this charge basically. and thinking to yourself, okay, well,
Because
he's kind
basically
of,
he just needs to excuse him and they'll let
yeah,
him go,
because
right?
this collector is kind of the villain in the movie, even though he's not. Like, he's not a bad person. It's just that, he wants his money back. He wants to collect a debt that's owed to him. But the way that we see him, because it's from the point of view of this other character, he is almost the villain.
Mhm.
And then as the story goes on, we become more sympathetic towards him as well, where, you understand that, like, part of it is that he feels that his daughter's dowry, was stolen from his family, because of this guy wanting this loan. So, and again, I actually really like the tug of war between, the PR of the prison and the PR of the charity as well. And, like, the idea is like, okay, you have to be on your best behavior, no, fights, or always be on your best behavior in front of the camera, because the media takes an interest in him as well. And I think that's fascinating to watch. And again, I think done in a more interesting way than, Dear Evan Hansen, in terms of exposing somebody, or, having
How
done
social
some,
media plays a part in it in
yeah, and the
videos.
backlash that eventually occurs. So I think there is a lot to, sort of,
Weirdly compare.
yeah, but also just respect in terms of what's going on, behind the scenes, as Farhadi directs and critiques sort of Iranian politics and culture in general. And that's also a very dangerous thing to do for an Iranian filmmaker in opposing the government.
Yeah, you're making good points.
But I
Um,
also understand where you're coming from, because it is very slow. The one thing I didn't like, there were two cinematographers on the film. I did find the movie, and I hate using this word to describe it, but it does have a very cheap digital look at times, that didn't really work for me. Where, like, a separation had more texture and grain.
yeah, and I think I would have preferred that in something like this. Like, I just felt the filmmaking very standard when it came. Like, you're making good points about, the direction isn't necessarily always just, how the style of the movie and the look of it and things like that. Like, he does direct it just in ways that I wasn't necessarily thinking about. But yeah, it just played out so simplistically, and I don't think that there's some necessarily anything wrong with that, but almost just too much so for me, to the
You
point
were just
where
disappointed that, A Hero by Chad Kruger and Josie Scott didn't play at the end.
some say that a hero can save us. I think I've sung that on this show or a different show before. Yeah, ultimately, unfortunately, just didn't work for me. I don't think it is necessarily a bad movie per se, just one that didn't really click with me. Like, I don't really have, like, again, when my biggest criticism, it was just like it was so slow I couldn't get into it, but I really like the lead performance and there's some interesting stuff in there that Eric's already brought up that, like, just not for me. I'm gonna unfortunately give it a 2.5. It just didn't work for me.
Cruel man. You're just like the collector, just wanting to punish that poor guy. I'm gonna give it a 4. I really
Oh,
did,
good,
dig it quite a
nice.
bit. It's not his best movie, but I
Yeah,
think it is a very solid film. And maybe one that you
you
shouldn't
sold me a
watch
little
early
bit
on.
more. Yeah, you sold me a little bit more. Like, it's fun having these conversations with you now that we're done with the professional review. Um, go listen to our Dear Evan Hansen review. It is. I always like doing this too because, like, this is day one, so I'm saying this now. Who knows, on day 4 I won't want to see Eric ever again. Um, but I just like having conversations and even different perspectives on things too, because it either makes me like a movie more, or I see where you're coming from, even though it didn't necessarily work for me. And then that's why I love doing this show, and I like
Well, that's what
at the
movies
end of
are
do
too,
one.
right? You're
Yeah,
seeing, like, we talked about this with Memoria as well. You're seeing a different style of filmmaking while watching this. And it's just
yeah.
fascinating to see, you know, culturally, cross culturally speaking, what is similar and what is different, and how editing and pacing specifically plays out differently in films from around the world. There's a lot of slow paced movies in, Asia and the Middle East and things like that, where,
And I'm just a
time
moron
is,
with a very small attention span. So
but at least you're giving it a chance.
yeah,
You
no,
you
I'm
watched the movie, you said there were things that you liked about it, especially the lead performance. And that's as much as anybody can do. At least you were open to the experience, to try something new. And you
that's
did.
what film festivals are great. Thank you all for listening. We really do appreciate it. We will be covering the entirety of the Toronto International Film Festival right here on Untitled Movie Reviews, on podcast services, as well as on our YouTube channel. Please go subscribe over there. Hit that notification bell. You'll get all our reviews in beautiful video format. We might do little conversations here and there. You guys can check out the conversations feed, kind of about of our experience and little bite-sized things here and there, but that'll all be over on YouTube. But if you want a one-stop shop for everything, head over to our Letterboxd HQ, which is Untitled_movies. Everything will be over there. Probably the easiest spot to just get everything you need. Thank you all for listening. As always, my name is Matt Rorabeck. You can find more of my work around the internet, mostly on UntitledMoviePodcast.com, and you can follow me on all those social medias at Matt Rorabeck.
And I'm Eric Marchen. You can find more of my video reviews at rogerstv.com/cinemascene and on the social medias at EM6211.
Until next time.
And they say that a hero could save
Is that offensive
us.
to this movie?
No,
Bye.
not at all.
No, not like legitimately offensive, but because it's Chad Kroeger. And anyways, bye everybody.
Josie Scott, how dare you?
We're already loopy. Bye.
Yeah.